Well, the question of starting over is really, really hard because we have to say the word Christianity only has a definition that emerges through time. So part of the process of starting over requires us to go back and look over our history. So, for example, for me as an American, it requires me to go back and look at the history of slavery, the history of segregation, the history of land theft of the native peoples, all of which was justified and supported through various forms of Christianity. And I know in Netherlands it would require looking at the Dutch role in the slave trade and the Dutch theology having a part in apartheid and so on. So there's this process. I think the idea of starting over is a beautiful idea in the sense it says, let's go back to the essence of what the Christian faith is supposed to be. But excavating to that essence is not easy and requires us to go back through our history. Second thing I would say, we have two starting points to choose. And one of them will be the church of the 4th and 5th centuries, which is the era of the great creeds. The other is to try to go back actually to the Gospels themselves. I think if we really want to get to the essence, we're going to have to go back and grapple with the New Testament documents and not limit ourselves to the conclusions about those documents that were made in the 4th and 5th centuries. And if we do that, it's going to force us to deal with a whole lot of other questions, because I think it's very hard to read the Gospels and come away with the idea that Jesus was out to start a new religion that was in competition with his religion of Judaism. In other words, Jesus' proclamation is this message of the reign or the kingdom or the commonwealth of God. His message is not, let's start a new religion and name it after me. So I think that's the second thing I would say. The third thing I would say, and I'm especially interested in this because I have spent a good bit of time in Europe, the sense that Christianity has failed and is losing ground in Europe. I think, obviously, church attendance is losing ground, and Western Christianity, as we know it, is losing ground. But another interesting question to ask is the kingdom of God losing ground? Is this essential reality that Jesus talked about losing ground? Some years ago as an American, in a book I wrote called A New Kind of Christian, in one of my early drafts of the book, I talked about the failure of Christianity in Europe. And a reviewer of that early manuscript said to me, you could make a case that Europe is the place where the values of Jesus' message are lived out better than anywhere else. Where would you rather be a woman? Where would you rather be a person with a disability or a serious illness? Where would you rather be a poor or unemployed person? There aren't too many places that provide better health care for the poor, equality for women, and protection for minorities than Europe. At that point, we articulate the problem as the struggle of the local church and our traditional denominations as entities. And that's maybe, to come full circle, why I love the question that you're asking, because then you can say, if our local congregations and denominations were to start from scratch, what would they want to be and do? What needs would they want to meet? What baggage would they need to let go? And what essential commitments would they need to lift up to make more important than anything else? Now, here's the interesting thing. I don't think in Netherlands and Europe and more places in the world, I don't think there's a big market, a great demand for communities that get people together to sing songs from the 19th century and before, and articulate statements from the 4th and 5th century in the thought categories and assumptions of the early Roman Empire, the late Roman Empire. But if you were to say, is there a need and demand for communities that help people become more generous, that help people become more committed to justice and peace, that actually train people to be peacemakers, to resolve conflicts, that identify the most important virtues that individuals and communities need to embody, and actually have a curriculum to help people develop those virtues. That a community that helps people articulate and pursue satisfying answers to their deepest spiritual questions. Suddenly, I think there's a huge need for that kind of community. If we raise this question, we're going to go back to scratch, go back to the beginning and start over. Then we'd say, well, we need new songs that actually help us do those things. Let me give you an example. I've been a committed Christian all my life since I was a child. I have almost never sung a song about poverty, that actually deals with poverty in church. The Bible has a lot to say about poverty, but the hymnody of the Western church says almost nothing about poverty. There are a few songs that celebrate the beauty of creation. I can't think of a single song that calls us to care for creation and protect creation from human greed. We have a lot of songs that address sin. Very few songs that name the kinds of sins that actually are destroying the world, like greed, like prejudice. I've never seen racism show up in a hymn that I've sung or contemporary song. We've had huge arguments about contemporary music versus traditional music when the lyrics of both almost never address the realities that we desperately need to address.